Welcome to the Spirit Rock Music YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about Bob Dylan's Senor, Tales of Yankee Power. In my eyes, this is a true gem of a song. Unlike other songs with spiritual context, Senor, Tales of Yankee Power does not only highlight one or a few aspects of a spiritual path, but rather it describes a process in much detail and with great images that leaves the candidate profoundly transformed, and I find that really fascinating. It was only quite recently that I became aware of the spiritual context of Bob Dylan's Senor, Tales of Yankee Power, even though it was released on the B-side of Changing of the Guards that I have made a video about, as well as the 1978 album Street Legal, which also contains Love in Vain that I have also spoken about previously. This is yet another Dylan song that has been extensively covered by many artists, including Willie Nelson, and there's a great version of Willie Nelson together with Calexico. It has been covered by the Jerry Garcia Band, by Tim O'Brien, and by many somewhat less famous artists, including bluegrass bands. Of course, Senor, Tales of Yankee Power can be interpreted in various ways, and I'm really keen to hear your views. From my point of view, the song can be read as questions of a disciple to his master about which path to take. But then we can ask ourselves, who is the disciple and who is the master? My take is that initiation processes necessarily change over time as mankind's consciousness evolves. A strong dependence of a student on a master doesn't fit in our modern times. Nowadays, it is more about personal responsibility and thus self-initiation. From that perspective, I'd like to read the lyrics as a dialogue that takes place within the seeker. Characters and places symbolize aspects within her or him. Quote from the lyrics: "Senor, Senor, can you tell me where we're heading?" So the seeker addresses the master, hoping for guidance. He or she does not follow personal ideas anymore. He is not driven by personal desires, ambitions, or hopes. He is ready to follow the source of wisdom deep within him. So let's talk a bit about topics and approaches to interpretation of the song. We continue a quote from the lyrics: "Lincoln County Road or Armageddon. Now what a start to a song." There's a great website that I can really recommend by David Weir, Bob Dylan Song Analysis, and he refers to Sam Peckinpah's movie Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, the music of which was written by Bob Dylan, including the famous Knockin' on Heaven's Door, which turned out a hit for Eric Clapton and Guns N' Roses. And in this movie, Dylan even played a minor acting role. The film relates to the 19th century Lincoln County War. According to Weir of Bob Dylan Song Analysis, this sets both revenge, the narrator as Billy the Kid, and Christ, the narrator as Son of the Lord, as topics of the song. I'd prefer to leave historical references aside and see the song as an inner process that can take place in any seeker at any given time. From that perspective, I see Lincoln County Road as a worldly aspect, be it in a geographical sense or as a symbol for worldly conflicts. And this is contrasted by Armageddon, that we can relate to the Bible, the book of Revelation, as a symbol for a radical departure from old ways, a symbol for the downfall of the life the seeker lived previously, to create space for a far-reaching transformation. So it is about a fundamental life decision, whether to continue in the old ways or whether the seeker is prepared to embark on a completely new path. Another quote from the lyrics: "Seems like I've been down this way before. Is there any truth in that, Senor?" End of quote. It is not the first time the seeker has reached this point. It seems he has matured to take the next step. We don't know if this just relates to unsuccessful attempts in his own life or even to previous incarnations. Another quote from the lyrics: "Senor, Senor, do you know where she's hiding? How long are we gonna be riding? How long must I keep my eyes glued to the door? Will there be any comfort there, Senor? End of quote. So we can ask ourselves, who is she? If we see the journey as an inner process, we may say that he longs for a conscious connection to the living soul. Nothing in the outward world can console him anymore. He is searching for a different state of being. While his yearning guides him, he still feels torn. The door inside him hasn't opened yet. So in the next verse, there's talk of a wicked wind blowing on the upper deck. There's a reference to an iron cross hanging from around her neck. There's talk of a marching band playing in that space where she once held him in her arms and asked him to not forget her. So what can we make of these images? The upper deck may be an image for his head, his thinking. Those who appreciate references to the Bible may think of Luke 22, 7-13, the Last Supper in a large room upstairs. A decisive step on the spiritual path is achieving unity of head and heart. The new impulses are first received in the heart, and then the seeker needs to align his mental state accordingly. So if there's talk of a wicked wind blowing on that upper deck, it can mean that chaotic, uncontrolled thoughts and impulses still dominate the candidate's mind. And I think we are probably all familiar with that state of being. What about the iron cross hanging around her neck? It may refer to the focus on the material world that the seeker still maintains at this point. The living soul has not yet been liberated. She cannot unfold freely. The iron cross is a stiff, inflexible caricature of the living cross that is erected within the seeker. By the living cross we mean that he receives the impulses from a higher sphere of life, which are hinted at by the vertical bar of the cross, and then the seeker transforms these impulses to concrete actions in his personal life on earth, which is symbolized by the horizontal bar. The space that is meant to be populated by the new soul within is still being occupied by a marching band that we may relate to all kinds of distractions that the old life still has to offer and which still claim the seeker's attention. No offense against real-life marching bands intended. At least the seeker knows now that his path is about a completely different state of being, a state that his innermost part is already familiar with. She once held him in her arms. So he remembers the former unity that was lost. His yearning intensifies. In the next verse, the seeker can see a painted wagon, he can smell a dragon's tail, and he can no longer stand the suspense. And he's really looking for a solution from the bottom of his heart. He really wants to know who to contact now. The dragon is a mythical creature. It reminds us of a world of fairy tales and myths, which refer to a realm beyond our material world. This realm can reach the soul via images and symbols, while at the same time being pushed aside by the rational mind, judged as an unreal dream world. The seeker experiences the tension between two worlds more and more strongly. He strives for a renewed state of being that extends beyond merely being touched inside, so as to be led from growing tension to a new form of harmony. The next phase in the seeker's journey is characterized by humbleness and a new focus in life. So he strips and kneels. But there are two things that he perceives before he does that. Firstly, quote from the lyrics, "A trainload of fools bogged down in a magnetic field." End of quote. And secondly, he perceives a gypsy, and the gypsy holds a broken flag, and a flashing ring. And he tells the seeker that this is not a dream anymore, it's the real thing. So what can we make of this imagery? The seeker entrusts himself more and more to the inner guidance. Taking off one's clothes is frequently used as an image in spiritual contexts for leaving an old state of being behind, with special regard to the subtle bodies, so the etheric, astral and mental aspects of one's being. The same idea we can also find in songs like Scarborough Fair, a traditional song that was popularized by Simon and Garfunkel, or similar aspect can also be found in Harry Styles' Sign of the Times and in Avicii's Wake Me Up. Back to Senor, Tales of Yankee Power by Bob Dylan. The seeker kneels, so he realizes his unworthiness more and more clearly, and he is ever more prepared to entrust his will to the new soul. This also brings about that he perceives the world around him with new eyes. The contrast between worldly-oriented life and the realm of the soul becomes more and more distinct. People who are not yet prepared to let go of the old life are tied up by a magnetic field. We can see that as reacting to worldly topics, be it fear or temptations, and thus missing out on giving way to impulses of the soul. If we don't look too much at other people but refer this to one's own life, the trainload of fools may relate to all the aspects of the seeker that react to worldly impulses in an automated way, like iron filings react to a magnet. While the dragon in the previous verse may give rise to doubt in the rational mind, we could epitomize this as, it's only a fairy tale, it is nonsense to adapt one's life to that. A shift in focus now, at this point on the path, becomes more evident. A gypsy, we can see him as an outsider similar to the Joker and the Fool in All Along the Watchtower, encourages the seeker. Not the impulses of the soul are the dream world, it is the other way around. The outward life is unreal, and the path leads to the truth. This experience is very well captured in movies like Matrix, 13th Floor or Truman Show. This is a great image for soul impulses arising from unexpected or unknown aspects of one's own system. The flashing ring may indicate that he keeps receiving impulses while a lasting, uninterrupted connection to the soul has not yet been established. At this point, it is about dedicating one's life to the new soul for good. After this clarification and encouragement, a phase of fulfillment, of self-realization starts. Quote from the lyrics, Senor, you know their hearts as hard as leather. Give me a minute, let me get it together. Just gotta pick myself up off the floor. I'm ready when you are, Senor. These are very powerful words. The seeker now needs to develop an ever more subtle perception of the impulses from the soul. Each step on the path releases new energy and brings about new tasks. He sees the hearts of his fellow human beings who have not embarked on this process as hard as leather. This is also true, of course, of his own heart, as far as it is still bound in old dependencies. But after having fully internalized humbleness, he may rise in the sense of the both magic and radical "Your will be done" from the Bible. And finally, the song ends, quote from the lyrics, Senor, let's overturn these tables and disconnect these cables. And he goes on to say, this place don't make sense to me no more. Can you tell me what we're waiting for, Senor? End of quote. Now the process reaches a point where the seeker can leave his old state behind for good, so that his transformation becomes irreversible. Overturning the tables may remind us of Jesus throwing the moneylenders out of the temple. if we relate this image to words from the first letter to the Corinthians, or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? End of quote. We may see this step as a purification of the seeker's whole being, including his thoughts, his emotions, his will, his ambitions in life, his habits, his emotional ties, and so on. The cables are finally disconnected. Old connections are cut off. Man, in the sense of a personality and a material, as well as several subtle bodies, is mortal. But the immortal aspect of man, that we may call a microcosm, surrounds these bodies like a magnetic field. Man's karma is stored in this magnetic shell, shapes his fears and desires, and directs him like a puppet. At this point on his path, these connections are neutralized one by one. It is no real battle, no suppression, rather being absorbed in a new vibration in which old patterns gradually lose their power over man. This process culminates in the soul reuniting with the spirit to form the spirit soul. Enriched by new insight, life in the old patterns seems more and more foolish. He embarks in the absolute here and now. Now I'm really keen to hear and read about your views of the song. Does it touch a side of you that is maybe hard to grasp and hard to describe with words? What fascinates you about this song? Let me know. Well, that was it for today. I hope you liked the video. Give it a thumbs up. If you did, consider subscribing the channel if you haven't already. All the best for your own quest. See you next time. Ciao.